and welcome to this edition of Exceptional Advice. So I've got a special guest in the studio today. So joining me is Kieran Hoare. So welcome, Kieran.
G'day, Baz.
I was just saying you're our first external guest to the show.
I was just saying how warm and fuzzy that makes me feel inside to have that privilege, Baz. Thank you very much.
No problems. You should feel warm and fuzzy. We definitely thought of you. So why have we got Kieran here today? Well, Kieran's become a good mate of mine. Over the years, he's been a client of mine. I've been a client of his. And the whole idea behind exceptional advice, going deeper, creating better outcomes for clients, building awesome advice-based firms, it's obviously a passion that you and I share. And a lot of the people who tune into this in other denominations of advice, so whether it's, coaching, consulting, financial advice, accounting. And so I wanted to kind of kick off with a perspective that comes from, a legal side of things as well. Sometimes the law can be a little bit transactional, at least at a surface level approach. And over the years, I've had plenty of occasions to work with lawyers. Sometimes positive, sometimes, negative, whether it's working with a client, helping them defend an ugly situation or, achieving something good or even just changing structuring or whatever. And I've certainly seen a lot of that. And one of the reasons why, I wanted Kieran to be here is because I always see him think about things a little differently with his clients, and I've experienced that firsthand. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about exceptional advice and what makes it exceptional, and maybe share some of the stories and lessons we've learned in an adult career filled with giving advice to people. But maybe we could start out, and you can just give us a little bit of your story. Obviously, I've come to know it reasonably well, and I'll ask you some questions about a few other things in there as we go. So what do you do? What's your firm do? And maybe just a little bit of background in how you got there.
Yeah, Baz, just turned over 18 years this November of practicing in a law firm. My dad warned me off against being a lawyer, but I ignored that advice and ended up here anyway. And look, it was a really hard slog in those first few years trying to figure out everything and how everything works and how businesses work, and quite a stressful kind of time. But then the more you get used to it and get used to situations, it turns to really feeling privileged to be able to be a lawyer and help out so many people in different aspects of their life and meet so many people. And so I've just been at the one place essentially. So I started as an articled clerk with Steve Grant, who was actually my father's first articled clerk. And it was a little firm then. I think there was one other part-time lawyer, and that grew, and I came on board as a partner in 2006, so only 4 years after I'd started. I think I was one of the youngest partners in Queensland, and we changed our name to Merthyr Law. And so it's me and Steve, and we've got 20 staff now in Brisbane. And I think we've got a really good operation that's doing some good things. We've got our really good culture and team members who have been there for quite a while, so we're buzzing along quite nicely. I decided in around about 2005 that I wanted to specialise in self-managed superannuation funds. I quite liked, one, the clientele that had these, and two, I guess the challenge from, all the rules were always changing so much, so it would definitely be an area where advice would be needed. And three, I figured, it's probably a good area to be in, that you're not going to be in the office till 11 or 12 o'clock at night, doing these urgent cases that often. It's probably something where you can have a bit of a work-life balance with it too. And Merthyr Law, I always say for Merthyr Law that our clients, it's typically they spend their own money. So it might be that they're a business with multiple shareholders, or a sole trader kind of business, just with the one family in it, but they're spending their own money rather than the bigger end of town where they're spending other people's money. And we might still have those, the executives from the bigger end of town when they're spending their own money and they're looking after themselves. So always got to be conscious of providing that value in those services. And so
sorry, I'm going to interrupt there for a second. That's really cool. you've just added a whole bunch to my own understanding of the people that I like to work with that I hadn't kind of considered before. I always talk about, working with small business, and I'm trying to describe, is it small business? Because I've worked with some pretty big companies as well. But when it comes down to it, that's exactly it. I just don't gel well with those people who are spending, they don't see it as their money. So even with the bigger companies, I've done some work with, some pretty significant sized firms, but it was always at a point where they still had a founder or someone connected to it that saw it as their baby and it was their thing, and that's the money they were spending. That's really insightful. Thank you for that. And sorry to interrupt, but learning, getting clearer on who it is you choose to serve is just so important, and that just added so much more depth than I can tell you in the short space of time. So awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, great. And so in that area, we just focus on, well, for me, the super, that estate planning and asset protection kind of angle. We've got the tax lawyer, and then we've got the family lawyer that kind of gels in well with that dynamic. And for those more traditional clients, we still do the commercial work, their business-to-business kind of work to help them out there.
Cool. So there's a couple of little things there that I wanted to dig into, and just for a little bit of context for people, tuning in. I actually had the chance with Daryl, who works with us, to go and film a bunch of stuff for you and your team. Where I'm very much focused on telling your story, telling your client stories. And so I had the chance to come and sit down and film a whole lot of content. As I was saying, that's the most amount of interviews I've managed to squeeze into a 3-day period. So the personal best. And I got to meet with not just your team, but a whole lot of your clients as well. But not just clients, also the other professionals that you work with that refer to the business. So it gave me the chance to get, a view, a complete view of perspective. So an internal perspective, seeing the culture, the team, the philosophy, seeing what other professionals who have mutual clients with you think. That was probably less of a surprise because I've already experienced that to a degree. But then also getting to talk to the clients who you've had such a meaningful impact on, a lot of their lives, and hear what they've had to say about the things that you've managed to do for them and how important the personal interaction was. So not that you help them, win their case or settle their dispute or, structure their estate or whatever, but how you help them, achieve clarity and resolution through those times in a personal way. So that was, all of that kind of came together. And it's like, well, I've got to get Kieran to sit down with me and do this first, be the first external guest. So one of the things I wanted to touch on quickly there is, because it's just, I don't want that to go past, is the synchronicity there. So, your dad was a lawyer. So helped build, one of the more well-known firms up here in Queensland. Was pretty successful. And I just love the synchronicity of you then went to work with Steve. You were his first article clerk, and Steve was your father's first article clerk as well. So that's pretty cool. Even if you didn't listen to your dad at the start, right?
Yeah, no, it's good to have that kind of family angle, and certainly that gets your foot in the door, but it also helps, as in there's a lot of our clients are in that same boat too. So, I'm dealing sometimes with people in my generation who are in the steps of taking over from their parents. And so, that real passing that baton from one generation to the next is what a lot of our lives are about.
Okay, so I always think that culture and, it always starts at your philosophy. So there's never a business problem. There's just a problem with business owners, right? So, I've been helping businesses all of my life, and that's always been the way I approach this, and which can be challenging for a business owner to hear, but that's how we get resolution and move past those things. So I always like to start with the foundational aspects. So obviously there's a couple of key things that just came out of what you were talking about before which shine through for me. So one, you didn't want to end up, in a place where you're working, till 9 p.m. at night, and that's just a standard thing. Now, I've interviewed lots of lawyers. I've had lots of lawyers as clients. I've worked with plenty of law firms and, helping them do lots of different things. And what I would say is, and it's certainly not at every firm, but the working long hours is pretty pervasive, right? It's pretty consistent. This focus on time and billable hours and, production.
Yeah, well, your work-life balance, it's one of those things I say to people, you're in charge of your own work-life balance. You can't blame it on anyone else. I guess from my perspective, though, it's as a leader, I wear as a badge of honour that I leave at 4 o'clock or 3:30 some days to go do things with my kids. And that flows down. And it doesn't mean that you're slack with your work and you're not doing your work. That's a given, that we've all got to make money and, we've all got to do our job. But just being tied to a desk doesn't necessarily achieve that. And I've heard from some of the people we interview that that's the culture, and they look up and, what is success? And so they look up and see a partner who's working even harder than them. And, it's expected that you to be there till 8 o'clock each night, every Saturday, even if you don't have enough work to do, just to maintain appearances. And, that's no version of success, being stuck to your desk all day. Life's for living. And I guess my take on it is, well, we've got our whole lives ahead of us, and work's a huge part of that. Why don't we make it fun while we work? And why don't we have fun with our clients? And it's a much better way to live life, isn't it?
Look, I think you just added some more depth to where I was going with this, because, as I said, I had the chance to sit down with your team and certainly your clients. And universally, and I'm just passing this on to you at the same time, so you're getting some more feedback. Universally, that's one of the things that your team said they loved about the business. So there's actually a couple of things. And if I were to summarize, the two kind of key ones is, number one, this is a place where I can be myself and show my personality and, be accepted. And look, you've got some quirky team members, but in a very positive way. I mean, and that's awesome. It's cool. But they actually can be themselves. I had the chance to kind of, stand by the door and listen into some of your team meetings and stuff like that. And there is definitely a vibe of people can speak, they can be themselves, they can be accepted, and they can have a bit of fun while they're doing that.
We had to work on that. A couple of years ago in the lunchroom, there was a motivational or demotivational plaque up in the lunchroom that said better days are coming, Saturday and Sunday. And so I took that down and, I said to everyone, hey, I want you to bring your Saturday self to a Wednesday. I want us all to be having fun. Like if we can't achieve that, what's the point? The weekends are different than the work days, but we're doing something wrong if all we're doing is living for the weekend.
That's a great one. I'm going to borrow that as well. Bring your Saturday self to a Wednesday. We've got a bit of a Friday ritual, and we call the end of Friday warm down, the BOM meeting. So it stands for Bring On Monday. So the idea is, we can actually have a bit of a celebration of what we've managed to accomplish, but also look forward to what cool things we might be able to make happen. I mean, look, there's never going to be 100% of your work days exactly the stuff that you want to do. But it's important to take yourself outside of that and to be able to, actually recognize what you're doing, but also to have some fun as you go. So that was the first thing with your team. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, of course, also some days you feel a bit flat, and that's life. You just acknowledge it and realize, all right, well, it's grumpy Kieran here today, but I see that and, we'll deal with it and move on.
Grumpy Kieran. I don't know if I've met Grumpy Kieran yet. I'm not sure I want to, so it's okay. I wasn't kind of encouraging that. No, just kidding. Yeah, so look, that was the first thing that I observed that was really clear with your team is that, hey, you know, I can be myself here. I can be a lawyer with some personality, and I can let that out, not just with my team, but I can let it out with my clients. And by the way, that came through equally with your clients. These are real people. We know them. We understand them. We've seen some of their quirks. They've shared those quirks with us. We've had a laugh. We've had some tears. But they're real people that actually care. So that was the theme that kind of was universal across, me getting a chance to talk to your team and to the clients.
And Baz, I've always been a bit quirky and a little bit different as a lawyer, but you've really...
Yeah, I actually meant you when I said you got... No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
But you, doing the course with you, you've really helped hone down, I guess there was still quite a level of professional veneer where it's about the technical advice and, so many of us lawyers hide behind that cloak of, this is my professional technical self. I've got these qualifications and I'm skilled in this area. And yeah, you're supposed to know your stuff and, your clients wouldn't be seeing you if you didn't. But geez, it's liberating when you can remove that and have real conversations. And, of course you're still doing a good job behind the scenes, but that's not you. That's just your work.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So it's kind of interesting because it's questioning this idea of what professionalism is. So we initially were, I certainly was, and by the way, it's not just lawyers, it's everyone in professional services. I was certainly indoctrinated into the school of professionalism, which if I was to describe it would be put on a front, wear the French cuff, wear the tie, don't look weak. Don't be vulnerable. Don't talk about yourself. Be precise. Be technically correct. Use proper grammar. Be very formal in your email writing. And that's professionalism. But to me, over the years, I've come to realize that's not professionalism. That's just being something you're not. And it actually puts distance between you and your clients.
I was just going to say that is usually what you put to the world gets reciprocated. And so if you're putting up that veneer and that distance, the client's going to do the same. And so you're talking about a pretend scenario from the client's perspective too. And are you really helping someone out when, we're all actually essentially telling lies to each other?
Yeah, no, it's very true. One of the measures we've created for, looking at client engagement for professionals is, we go through and we talk to them and we've actually been building algorithms and, questionnaire sets to go with this. But one of the key things that really determines the depth of your client engagement, and this has an effect on, price sensitivity and referral rates and all kinds of stuff that are important in an advice and services firm, is mutual vulnerability. So, the old school was you want your clients to be vulnerable, but you don't want to be vulnerable. That's professionalism. But it can't actually work that way. So it's kind of what you were saying. If you're not prepared to go there, then how can your clients ever go there? So there needs to be a degree of openness from the outset. And as I always say, are clients joining your business or are you joining theirs? So, and if the answer is you're joining theirs, well, it's not your business. You're not doing it your way. So that's the bit that I have loved seeing about Murtha Law. And certainly, I mean, you guys were already doing this, but certainly helping see that blossom is, being yourselves, being human, connecting with people, and remembering that giving advice around an outcome or, legal precedent or whatever, it doesn't mean anything except for how it connects to the life of the person behind it.
And that's a big thing to drill down to and to get to is why. Why are you here today? And not that superficial reason of that list of things they've got written down with these questions, but, why are you here today? What's the important issue you're here to solve? And sometimes that's very, very different than what's being verbalized or what the surface level of what they're saying they're here to see you for is.
Almost always the case. And one of the other reasons I wanted to have a chat to you today was because that's always exceptionally so when it comes to, estate matters, right? Because you're dealing with interconnected family relationships. Sometimes it might be disputes. Sometimes it might be, setting up an estate itself, and that in a lot of circumstances can lead to disputes. It could be, transitioning of assets during that process, whether, people are alive or not. And that brings out tensions. And because of the feelings of that have accumulated in the history in relationships, people can often say they want one thing when they're coming from an emotional perspective, right? So, I've certainly seen this in helping clients deal with their estate matters as well.
And we see that all the time also, as in there's one problem that someone might be focusing on. And so you find the solution to that problem, but you're looking just with the blinkers on just to that problem, and you're creating 5 others that they haven't thought about. And, our role is, I guess, to try to have a bit of a broader perspective so we can see the big picture and see if we can communicate that and bring it all in.
Yeah, look, super important. Even just a small example, just not so long ago, I was looking at doing a bit of a restructure and taking on a partner for some of the stuff that we're doing. And so I obviously came to see Kieran because I've got my pick of lawyers, but I want someone with personality who I know is going to care about me and can think through these things. And it's interesting because if you just had have taken my instructions and we went through it, there would have been a pretty significant, fee involved. But really it just ended up being, a meeting or two, and me deciding not to go ahead because you helped be a mirror to some of the things I was thinking and ask some questions. And I think that's really important. It's very difficult to be objective about your own decision making. In fact, it's almost impossible. And so when you're going to an advisor, when the advice is exceptional, it's not just good. So this is kind of one of the definitions that I have behind this whole idea of exceptional advice. Good advice might be someone saying to you, this is what I'm afraid of. This is why I'm pissed off. This is how I want it to happen. This is what I want them to get. And here's how I want it to work. And you going, okay, and here's all of the technical lay of the land, and here's all the structuring, and here's all the steps, and you make that happen exactly how they've said. Could you call that good advice? Yeah, I guess you could. But what if that actually, in the long run, makes their life worse? What if that doesn't help them resolve the issues that they've got in front of them, or, as you said, causes 5 other problems that could have been resolved by just asking harder questions and going a little deeper with them?
And that's it. It's especially in that initial meeting is digging down and asking those questions of why and what purpose and what's the end goal and figuring that stuff out. And like you said before, I'm often telling people, the conclusion is don't use me yet. You don't need to. But it's a long game. And the people who I've helped out, who I've recommended against doing what they want to do, guess what? They're so loyal and they start spruiking me to others. And, it's not the focus on, making this fee for this month. It's helping them have a better life and a better overall outcome, which is always going to win in the long play.
It's the old-fashioned goodwill, right? So building goodwill. That's exactly how I'd describe it. So, I'm really grateful that, just in my personal experience. And so do I feel like I want to tell people that they should speak to you in similar circumstances? Yeah, absolutely. So just remember that it's about building relationships, and relationship goodwill is the capital for all professional services firms, I believe. And I certainly think you guys have managed to build some pretty impressive relationship capital. The amount of, Steve's obviously been doing this for a while, your partner. We got some interesting stories from clients about him being himself. So he's a bit of a character as well. He's certainly done some interesting things. So he's been a hero in 2 gun incidences now, which is quite interesting. So rescuing people in 2 different circumstances. Like the chance of it happening once, but anyway. So, over those years, there's certainly been a lot of goodwill building. And if it's always got to come down to, are you there to create, an outcome for people's lives rather than just to do a task? And that's one of the things where the law can absolutely go wrong. People who come into the legal profession that get caught up on the law itself and the task and being a good lawyer, instead of remembering that, as an officer of the court, you're actually there to help people in their lives, but also navigate the legal system. But that it's their lives that come first.
Yeah, and just what you said before, it's not a good feeling if you're just taking dictation and doing a task as someone prescribed without the why are you doing this, and having a little bit of input into helping with that decision-making process. And I definitely prefer the ones where it's a mutual discussion and we both help each other reach that conclusion. And quite often, there will be circumstances where I offer some input or advice and, to someone who's made a lot more money than I have and has done a lot more successfully in business than I have. And, they'll be getting advice from 5 different, sounding out 5 different kind of people about it to then make a decision. And, that's fine, but I'm still privileged that I'm part of that decision-making circle that, helps, these people make those important life decisions, rather than I'm just a glorified secretary.
So was there kind of a point in your career, was there a point where you can remember some of these things really clicking for you? Or has it been a gradual evolution? I certainly have a few key trigger events that, I can recall going, this client interaction really helped me to understand this.
Yeah, well, I guess when you start out, when I started out, looked like I was about 12. And so some of the elderly clients would ask me what grade of school I was in. And
fortunately, you look like you're 15, so it's okay.
And I guess trying to get people to take you seriously and, for those important life decision judgments when you look like you're 12 is probably a bit of a tall ask. Sometimes I'd get around that by just talking to them on the phone and, they'd already be impressed by the time they'd meet me. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can't expect to be in that circle of trust and, have that level of influence from the outset. That's something that you've got to earn. And then you get the chance to. And clients will show that appreciation that, you've helped them through some really tough times and, you've helped them make some decisions or help them reach some epiphanies they might not have. And they let you know about that. And it feels good. And you have a better relationship. And then, I guess you got a bit more confidence to bring that to the next transaction and the next, I shouldn't say transaction, the next interaction that you're professionally in.
It's kind of interesting. We might just take a little bit of a segue there about giving some input for younger professionals. So, Tristan, who sits in on the show with me as well, being a young person and now moving into advising our clients and doing those things. This has been part of his journey, but certainly, when I started out, I was only 22 when I started giving advice to people. And I hadn't turned 24 when I started my own firm from scratch.
Did you own your own car?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I actually had my first Lotus Elise by that point in time, so I was driving the Lotus Elise around. And so I started my own firm, dealing with pretty successful people. And certainly I was kind of chuckling thinking about it when you said, I get to advise these people who have achieved a lot more than me. Well, at that point in time, every client that I was seeing had certainly achieved, a lot more than me.
Yeah, they're still seeing you and still paying you.
Yeah, they were. And I kind of thought this would be a good segue to talk a little bit about, because I see a lot of young professionals struggling with this transition of getting respect. And so you talked about earning it, which is absolutely true. But what I'm also going to say, and this just helps you to get maybe the right mindset, I found, is you can't wait for people to give it to you. You have to take it. So I'm still talking about earning it, but as you earn it, you take it. Like, you don't do stuff and then hold yourself back waiting for a client to give it to you. Every bit that you earn, you take, and you earn more and you take more. And the same thing goes when I'm almost finished, and then I'll get you to give me your thoughts on this. Same thing goes when you're working with your peers. So if you're working with a senior advisor as you start out, in this case, article clerk, or, being a paraplanner or a junior advisor or associate advisor or, accountant or manager, and you're working with someone more senior in that position, and you're looking to get more responsibility with the client, you have to earn it and take it with them too. You don't just wait for them to hand it over to you, because if you do, you're always holding yourself back. And that's been some of the best advice that I've been able to give to, younger people in their career development as well. Do you have any insights in that?
Definitely. And you've got to remind explicitly, this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved. Even in your bill, you can remind people of, these are the achievements that, you've created.
Sorry, I'm just turning my phone off because the notifications were going off.
Yeah,
bad call for the person running the show, right?
And interestingly, I in one video I put up, I was looking at this app, Pep Talker, which is on the situation of, apparently men are much better traditionally at being able to say how good they are in the performance reviews and the interviews, and that's part of the reason why men get paid more than women. Women have traditionally kind of focused more on the things that might have gone wrong, or aren't as good at talking themselves up. And so in this app, it was a little reminder of, these are the things I've achieved today, and, these are, and, you put it in there through the year, and hopefully it comes time for a performance review. And you're like, actually, no, look at all these things I've achieved in the last year, and tick that off. And, the idea there being is to try to bridge that gender gap by really, I guess, helping women explicitly talk up their wins and talk up, the good side of it.
Yeah, it's kind of really interesting stuff. And by the way, I think that would be equally useful for men, but for a slightly different reason. So the characteristic trait which you're talking about there, which is usually coined from a psychological perspective, is assertiveness. So typically men score higher on assertiveness as a personality trait. Now, in my own research, you have personality traits that are ingrained, but you also have personality expression, which is adopted. Okay, so you've got traits and expression. And from an outside world point of view, it could be either one of those things that you're experiencing when you see something in someone else. So I don't think that from a personality trait point of view that there's really much difference between men and women as to how assertiveness factors into who they really are. But I will say that, cultural indoctrination and all of those kind of things have led to an expression of assertiveness being stronger in men. Okay?
So the classic one they say is men might be leadership material, and women might be bossy, depending on the perspective, and the bossies are kind of put down. Don't speak up.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, this whole idea. I mean, I've been self-employed, my whole life, and work with small business people. So, I mean, any of those things I would just never tolerate or see that often. But I certainly get to talk about it with clients and what they've experienced. I think all of this comes down to getting the best out of all of your team members, and you certainly have a strong balance in representation between, male and female representation in the law in your office. And I certainly don't see any difference when I was, talking to your team about, how they're going or their career objectives or pathways forward. So that's good. But yes, assertiveness, or the expression of assertiveness is really important for everyone. And one of the reasons why, we all act counter to our best interest is it's always a self-worth issue. So typically there'll be slightly different expressions for men, slightly different expressions, for women. But yeah, being assertive about what you're doing and how you're doing it is pretty important. Same thing with your clients, if we kind of take it back to the whole client engagement idea, one of the best things that you can do with your clients is, so if you're an accountant or financial advisor, then, you've got to be, or you or one of the other people in your team have got to be speaking with and meeting with them, every year. Kieran, in your case, that's not always the case. I mean, your best clients are going to keep coming back and seeing you, but it'll be, some years it might be 100 times and other years it might not happen. And obviously there's differences in managing relationships and things there. But as far, sorry, go ahead.
I don't think it's a good trait, but we're more reactive than typically financial planners who will be more on the front foot. We wait for the clients to approach us rather than vice versa. And that's something I'm trying to change that dynamic a bit.
Okay, that's interesting. I might, if we can kind of come back to that, I'd like to delve into to what you think about that and maybe some ideas for it. So my point out of that being that if you're a financial advisor and accountant, you need to be meeting with your clients every year, right? And so if you're a lawyer listening into this, then just think about this at the end of an engagement or at the start of another engagement. One of the best things that you can do to cement the relationship is to directly state the value you think you've provided your client. So if you're a financial advisor, hey, look, this is where we're at now. How are you feeling? What are you doing? Where do you want to be next? Let's look forward, look back, look big picture. That's a bit of a psychological sequence that I talk about in client engagement, but I won't go into that for now. So you're doing all of this, this kind of stuff with them. And you're getting your client to kind of see the picture, but then you actually need to say to them, hey, look, this is what I've seen. So in the time that we've been together, you're clearer, you've got clearer direction, you've moved closer towards accomplishing these three things that, you talked about were really important in your life. And I feel like we've made a major contribution to that. So that's the first step. One is you being assertive, using that as the analogy and saying, hey, look, I think we've really had an impact here for you on the important things that you told us that you wanted to achieve. So if you're an advisor and you're engaging clients, it's super important to actually understand what the life definitions are behind the scenes, not just the surface level stuff. Otherwise, you can't do this. Secondly, to then say to them, what do you think you've got out of it? Do you agree? So what this is doing is turning the implied into explicit. And assertiveness is really important for that. Because when it comes to, investigating at any point in time a particular circumstance, like are we re-engaging with you? Are we paying a fee? How are we feeling about it? Are we going to give you a pay rise? Do you deserve a pay rise? A conscious mind isn't very good at bringing out those explicit things in the moment. So that's a pathway that I would follow. And I think it's super important for any advisor to use with their clients.
And beneficial to the clients, I would imagine, too.
Absolutely.
As in, because we always kind of underestimate our achievements to a certain extent, because of the thing we didn't achieve rather than the 10 things that we did achieve. And, having someone outside just explicitly reminding you of all the goals that you've kicked, I think it is really good for your self-esteem and to help you finish off the rest of them.
Yeah, I should actually have had some of that stuff in front of me for you. I was just kind of thinking back to we haven't actually done that this year, which we should do. So there's a question that I like to ask clients, and this question's not my own, so I always give attribution whenever I'm using something from someone else. So it comes from a guy called Dan Sullivan, and he calls it the R factor question, relationship question. So imagine we're sitting together in 3 years and you were looking back over the last 3 years. what are the things that you would have need to have seen happen in your life, you know, personally, financially, business-wise, you know, all of those things, don't limit it, to go, you know what, that's been an awesome 3 years. And so I ask all of my clients this, and I've asked Kieran this. And I remember in the first year we had we were mostly focused on expression and, you know, building the message of the business and, you know, a bunch of those kind of things. And it was pretty cool that the 3-year list, I think almost everything on that in the first year, you'd managed to tick off in the first year. So that was pretty cool. I think that's a good way to do it. It doesn't matter if you're asking that question specifically, but you need to be able to give your clients clarity. And as you said, help them to look back where we're psychologically not engineered to do this the right way. So you have to actually program yourself. So you've heard me use this analogy before, Kieran, the looking towards the horizon. So in our mind, we all have this, you know, the ideals that are playing in our brains, right? So we have these little video clips of what things might look like in the future. By the way, this one's also from Dan Sullivan. So there's only 2 things I borrow from someone else directly, and they both come from him. So check him out. And so you're looking towards the horizon and you're setting your goals based on there it is in the future. I want to move towards it. And so you set off and you start marching towards the horizon and your goals. And, you know, a day, 2 days later, 3 days later, a week, a year, whatever, you're still there looking at the horizon. Are you any closer to the horizon? No, because the ideal is always moving in your head, right? So it's super important to set your goals and your focus towards the horizon, because everyone needs to feel like they've got movement. I mean, that's the journey of life. Is the journey of life is the moving towards the horizon. You never actually get there. Sorry, spoiler alert. But then in the measuring of yourself, or the recognition, is that you don't measure yourself looking forward. You measure yourself looking back. Because no matter what you achieved, no matter what you accomplished, if you didn't get past the first hill or the mountain or cross the stream, whatever, no matter what, you've always gone forward. There's always something to take out of what you've had, a lesson to learn. So looking back over that is super important. And that's one of the key roles of what I think an exceptional advisor's job is to do, is to help your clients stop. Because they're focused on that, you know, that video that's playing in their head, the horizon. This is what I want. This is what I need.
Did they know that?
This is what I'm upset about.
Usually, do they have clarity on that, or?
Well, they've got clarity about a narrow band of it, right? And that's the thing, that you're not being objective. So it's impossible to be objective about your own finances. It's impossible to be objective about your business. It's impossible to be objective about your legal structures. It's impossible because it comes with emotional attachment. And that's why exceptional advice is so important, because exceptional advice is getting your client, you know, to take a step back from that and to look at it and go, well, hang on a second, where do I actually want to go? Where do I actually really want to be? And how am I going to measure myself against it?
And I'm guessing that end goal isn't necessarily expressed in monetary terms. It's diving down deeper to, you know, what does that picture look like of my life? Because money's just a mechanism to help live that life.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because today's podcast day. So I actually just did one with Taborjan. I'm not sure if you met Taborjan. You probably have. And so he's put together a show called Rich with Purpose, and we're kind of talking about these exact same things. So he works with, you know, very wealthy clients, but his whole focus is on, well, you've got to still be in alignment with purpose. The money itself doesn't mean anything. I mean, how many wealthy people have you met that are pretty miserable? I've met quite a few.
Well, that's one thing that really upsets me in estate planning is you have a client who is looking at this pile of money and shares and will refuse to touch it to make their life better or their loved one's life better. And to what end?
You know, it's really interesting that you've raised that. And I think this is a good segue because, as you know, a lot of our audience is in the accounting and financial advice space. And so these are the guys that will normally be talking to a lot of the clients before they kind of get to you. So I think it's important for context for them to be pushing the envelope on these things. It's so super important. And it's certainly an area that I think is it's the one, if you're looking at a, dimension of accounting and financial advice that is underdeveloped, underdelivered, it would be the estate field. Too often it's just kind of flicked past. And part of the reason is because whenever you start scratching the surface in the family stuff, right, in almost any family circumstance, you scratch the gilded surface, right? There's always some crap going on, as there is in all relationships.
Definitely. And I would like to share a story of a conversation I had this week. And this is a client who his biggest concern is he doesn't want his estranged children or anyone to get their stuff, and part of that's the family farm and some other properties that they've got. And, got to spend some money to protect it. And I say, but to what end? Most people who see me, they want to give their stuff to loved ones and want to change people's lives. And, this is for life. What you're proposing is you just want to make sure no one can ever sell your stuff or spend your money or do anything with this. He's like, that's spot on. That's exactly what I want, Kieran. And I'm struggling to get him to move on from buying the $3 hamburger patties and living a better lifestyle himself. And the sad thing is he's going to pass away, his brother's going to pass away, and this money's going to be locked up, and he's not going to have any influence of what ultimately happens with it. But I haven't struck a chord. I haven't been able to cut through there yet. So that is one where his goals are clear. So I'll help him achieve that objective for the time being.
Yeah, that's a challenging one for you, certainly. Now, I'll use a couple of examples because in some part I think was by the way, was that person referred by an accountant or financial advisor? Obviously, I don't want to know who.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me personally, I think that the gateway for that conversation should really, I'm not saying it shouldn't be on your end, but it should also be on the financial advisor and accountant end.
Well, everyone's been working hard.
Right. Okay. Good.
There's some difficulties there.
Well, no matter how well you dig and how well you do, there's some people that just aren't going to go there. He obviously has a bunch of internal conflict that he's not willing to resolve. But the point that I'd make out of that is actually going there and trying to be objective and resolve it. I'll give you another example of, a scenario I've seen, lots of different ways play out. So this is another client of mine who's a financial advisor, a lady who in her 70s. Husband had built up a property portfolio, so it was worth about $6 million. Mostly commercial property, so no debt. She's living in a house, nothing fancy, pretty small and needing repairs, and struggling to be able to afford to do anything. Right, so living off the leftover rent, but these are all older properties. Yield not as good. You get the idea, right? And so my client had been advising her for some years, but there wasn't much dollars to actually give her advice around or invest or do anything. Fortunately, the council resumed one of the properties, so that kind of took it off the table, and at least she was able to put aside $700,000 or $800,000 into superannuation so that she could actually eat. But she's got 3 adult daughters, right? And so here she is. Her husband's passed away, I can't remember, about a decade earlier, so a significant period of time, right? So in this time, she hasn't done anything with the properties. She's talked about selling them. Jamie had taken her through looking at all of this stuff, given her fantastic advice around structuring and dollars and returns and making life easier, but nothing's changing. And so, we sat down together and I said, okay, look, let's take a look here. What's really going on? What's the real issue? The real issue is that she's gone into a shell, right? So husband died. So we have three reactions that we have by default as, living beings when we're confronted by a challenging circumstance. So you've heard the two, as everyone has, which is fight and flight. So interestingly enough, that's
fight, flight, or freeze.
Freeze, right? Yeah. So freeze is actually the predominant response out of pretty much any being, and it's certainly in all of my years of observing people, it's the most common.
That's the one that you have the nightmare with, usually, that something bad's happening and you freeze and you wake up.
Yeah, something else happens in mine, but that's another story. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you think about, whenever you're talking about these things, you use the whole, animals on the plains of Africa thing. So, the lion's stalking you and you spot them, you don't run off. Like, you freeze because maybe they haven't seen you. So just using that analogy. So this is where we'd got to. So she'd been paralyzed by some, a whole bunch of different things. So what are the real issues here? Well, one, she obviously loves her daughter. She doesn't want to make mistakes. She also doesn't want to be a bad wife and let go of what her husband had created. So she's been holding on to this memory and then measuring her self-worth. Well, he built this thing. He didn't sell any properties. I don't want to stuff it up. I don't want to blow it up. And if I sell these properties, am I a bad person?
Yeah, you're hurting his legacy is
right.
Perception.
So this was actually the issue. Now, I've done this thousands of times in helping advisors dig into the real issues behind the scenes. So I said, this is how you need to go and approach it. And obviously, I won't go into all of that detail today. But you need to have a challenging conversation with her and say, hey, look, are you actually living your life?
Yeah, I was just thinking that you've got to, empower a person to go, well, that was his life. He did great, but you're still living your life. And the story's being told now.
And you've got to let it go. And you've got to think about your daughters. And you being paralyzed and holding on to these things, is that the best thing for them? So you want to pass this wealth on to them. Why? At what consequence? You're not even making decisions to make sure that happens in the right way. What happens if, they inherit a couple of $1 million each and they're not prepared for it? Do you think they're going to make better decisions than you? Do you think their husbands will make better decisions than you?
And, everyone's living longer now. Our age expectancy is increasing. And so what I see is you might die when you're 90. But your standard of living, your quality of life hasn't been that great since you were 75 for a lot of people. And they get an inheritance when they're 75. And that inheritance sits in their bank account. My Nana would write out a check to my grandfather, I'd call him Jack, for his birthday. It'd be $50 or $100 or whatever it was. He'd go to the bank and bank it in his bank account until it was her birthday, and the process would be reversed.
Oh, that's a classic. I haven't heard one like that. That's a good story.
And maybe, hey, isn't money supposed to improve our lives? So perhaps, like you were saying, when some of your children, had mortgages and their kids in private school and, helping them get used to money a bit and improving some lives and, keeping your family unit richer as a whole rather than all this stuff happening when you're not around to oversee it or enjoy it. Perhaps, that's a manner of estate planning that's going to be more rewarding for everyone.
Yeah, it's the bigger question. What do you actually want to leave behind? Not just when you're dead. What do you want to leave behind as a consequence of your life? So as a financial advisor, I would always go much deeper into not just estate planning, but legacy planning. What are you leaving behind? What messages do you want to leave behind? What were the best lessons that you've learned in your life that if only someone could have passed them along to you? Have you shared them for your, for your great grandkids? What about your parents? What about your grandparents? What about their stories that were meaningful to you? Are you passing them along? So there's so much for you to leave behind, the experiences, the way you impact people. And sure, the money is a part of that, but only because it's going to help create experiences for others beyond you. The money in and of itself does nothing. It's only the experiences it creates. So thinking about it in those terms and asking the challenging questions, I mean, so often as a financial advisor, you'd encounter those situations all the time. People that have got more money than they're ever going to be able to spend in their lifetime, but their lives are being driven by the fear of not having enough. So they're eating the tin spam, and in some cases literally, when there's no need to. So in this particular circumstance, helping this client go through this scenario, instead of it being a small engagement for him, ended up being a massive engagement. Training her daughters, actually taking them through how to think about money, how to plan for your future, how to be objective about this stuff, getting them to buy into the process, making sure they actually contributed financially to some of that as well as the mother, and helping her see her life forward. And, there's been like hundreds of circumstances where I've either worked with similar scenarios or helped other advisors indirectly. I can't tell you the number of times that kids have come back and said, in that particular example, you've saved my mum's life. She's actually living again. Mum's got a date, stuff like this. So that's the exceptional advice. You've gone far beyond you don't want to sell the property. You're resistant to that. There's only so much I can do, to actually going, all right, well, where are you at? Why are you doing this? Why are you holding yourself back? Is this what you're doing? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about the memory? How does it make you feel when you contemplate selling these properties? How does it make you feel? What are you afraid of? They're the real questions that you need to be delving into in order to help people to move forward. And look, I really like those tricky scenarios. So if you wanted to bounce that one off me, it probably sounds like he's beyond any of us to help out, but worth a shot.
And look, I often see that exact circumstance too of initial engagement is how do I watertight ensure my estranged children or child can't make a claim. And then over the years, it reverts to actually making amends and making peace with that relationship and bringing them back into the life. So, I love it if that happens.
Yeah, look, and I certainly think that that's where, if you're a financial advisor, an accountant, or any advisor, you need to be going for that bigger life picture. So many circumstances I've seen in exactly those kinds of scenarios as well, Kieran. And some of them, they're too caught up in emotionally to be able to have that objective input. But certainly plenty of cases where I'm like, no, is that really, do you want the relationship to be estranged? Do you want it to be like this? Yeah, but they're like this and they do this, and okay, but that's them. Does that mean that you have to be this way? What's the objective here? Is the objective to punish them for being that way, or is the objective here for you to get the most out of the relationship with your kids that you can? And there's got to be compromises in all relationships. And so often when you're dealing with these, things as they go, at this particular point, I'm helping another client with a family that's going through generational transfer. So you've got the father founded the business. Then you've got, son and daughter that have come in, and you've got son-in-law who are now running the business, and, they've tripled the size of the business. But the father, still owns a lot of, and so the share. So there's all of this, oh yeah, but we didn't get this and he didn't do that. And well, all of the, like, what, you're going round and around in circles, not resolving things because you're focusing on, the wrong stuff. Let's take a step back from that. Where do we actually want to get to? Do you really need to hold on to that?
And that's a scenario, I guess, where when lawyers get involved, it can play out two ways. One is everyone gets entrenched in their positions and everyone spends a lot of money and fights and hates each other more and, burn up a lot of the inheritance. I've heard another lawyer call it a wealth transfer file. The wealth transfers from the client to the lawyers.
Yeah.
Or are the lawyers there to help their clients get a bit of clarity and come past some of these issues and, just be a little bit more, I guess, distant and, without that emotion in there and help bring their clients to a better place so then they can have a more sensible conversation, acknowledge that they've got some issues to work through and perhaps come with a resolution where, one, everyone can live with it and two, hopefully, it might be the start of reconciling some of these problems.
That's a shocking perspective for a lawyer. For a lawyer to have, Kieran. Look, I think that's a good way to bring some of what I've been talking about to a specific head in your case, right? With a lot of what I see in the legal profession, and as I said, as someone in professional services, I've seen this happen many times with mutual clients, etc. The law and disputes and resolving things can literally turn into, as you said, a wealth transfer and same thing with family law, going through a divorce. And, talking to Pete, the family lawyer in your business, that was pretty cool. And he talks about exactly the same things in helping people not get carried away in actually figuring out how to resolve it amicably. But so many law firms that I see, it's like they're absolving their responsibility and their focus is on pursuing the fight.
Well, I've seen some where they name the file at the start. It's a 50 file. It's a 150 file. And that's when they start getting serious about reconciling once their billables have got up to that mark.
Yeah.
It happens, I'm sure.
I know. Oh, look, it does. And as I've said, I've seen plenty of examples where that's the case. But this comes back to what you were talking about before. If you're playing the short game and you're looking at it as, okay, well, how much can I bill? What can I get out of this? Then, okay, that might lead you to get more dollars for that particular, client engagement, right? So instead of it being amicably resolved 20 grand or 40 grand, whatever, resolved, I won't say amicably, 250 grand. So instead of it being the 250 grand, you've actually created goodwill. And I definitely think that, you can use the word karma or whatever else you want. I like the word goodwill because it gives it a practical overlay. Your business has definitely been built on the philosophy of, well, let's just be honest. Let's be really direct with people. That was one of the comments that I had for both of you from your clients. Especially Steve. He can be really blunt. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing this. Are you sure? That's ridiculous. But helping them actually be clear about the decision making rather than just trying to get the work and bill the file. And that goodwill always comes back. Just listening to, so many of the people that I interviewed had referred other people to your firm. And that's one of the key characteristics of a great business is that it's got that goodwill where, a lot of the stuff you guys do is unpleasant circumstance, right? There's unpleasant circumstances around it. It's a traumatic experience. So most law firms that work in those fields don't tend to get a lot of referrals from clients themselves.
Because people don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, because it was traumatic, right? But I can definitely see that your clients themselves refer a lot. They were telling me. But people don't say, oh, yeah, they helped me resolve this dispute and, I paid them $1 zillion and it took 3 years and it was awful. And we never... No, they say, hey, they really thought about me. They helped get clarity and get to a resolution sooner. They're good people that care about you and they're not going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you what you need to know. That's the kind of stuff that your clients are saying. That's what creates the goodwill. So I think too often professionals as I said, have that professional veneer. Let's not open the can of worms. Let's not dig deeper. Clients might be offended.
And this is my work self. And
Yeah.
I can't let anyone know my weekend self.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of life would you be I mean, I just think back to, okay, maybe I tried to do that when I first started out. I don't think I ever did it very well, which is one of the reasons why I started my own firm so early.
Well, before I saw you, I was like, unless I was, literally a good friend with a client, I wouldn't let them near my Facebook or whatever. But now I'm like, hey, what's the difference? Your personal life and your law life. If someone has a real bee in their bonnet about your personal life, well, it's probably not going to be that much of a fun relationship anyway, is it?
Yeah, no, I saw your latest video. I'm trying to remember what it was about now. It was obviously an estate planning matter. Was that the advanced
funeral planning?
Oh, the funeral planning. That's right. And so you had the shorts on as well in that one. So that was probably the best bit. Seeing a lawyer be happy to jump up and do a video about a pretty in-depth technical topic, but being comfortable, doing it their way. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I always say to people, if you're going to go to a lawyer, make sure you get one that's actually got a personality and is going to care about you. That's the most important thing. Secondly, yeah, you want to make sure they're good at what they do, right? That's your ticket to the game. But if they don't have the other bit first, then the outcome's not going to be the same. And that's certainly how I make my choices of engaging other professional advisors.
And, it's very serious stuff we talk about, but despite us talking about our mortality and death and loved ones and all of that, counterintuitively, we do manage to make it a bit of fun and have a laugh along the way and, not take ourselves too seriously. And our clients, I get a fair bit of feedback that it was a lot more pleasant process than they thought. And the best thing they did was just starting.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that's also been the feedback that I had in speaking to a bunch of your clients. Some of the stories were so funny that I can't actually share them. Share them on air, right? No, it was nothing crazy. When being in your office, there's a cool communal lunchroom. There's some funky stuff up on the walls. There's I think that this has been taken down, but I heard about Steve's singlets that he was wearing in the different, was it triathlons that he was competing in?
Yeah, I had to help with some office politics there to make sure that those crusty old sweaty singlets were out of view of one of the younger solicitors' rooms because it wasn't motivational for them. The other one you probably didn't see that, we always ask in performance reviews, anything we can do to improve. And Steve was away on holidays, I think. And he's got this Dusty Jesus, which is the Last Supper.
I did see that. They took
everyone hates it and it collects dust. And so, yeah, after one performance review, I was like, oh, if everyone's shitty about this, that's pretty easy. I just pick it up and move it, But Steve still hasn't managed to say goodbye to Dusty Jesus. No one's letting it in his house. So I think he's got it hidden where no one can see it near his office.
It's up in the back corner on top of the filing cabinet. I can tell you that now. So 4 different team members told me about Dusty Jesus. So there you go.
Really?
So yeah, so I went for a little walk and said, let's see if I can spot it. And that's where it was, up on this filing cabinet in that back, just next to where his room is. So anyway, my point out of all of that is there's definitely some fun involved. There's plenty of smack talk, as I would call it. And I think it's important to help your clients in order to have objectivity, you need to be yourself. And if you're going to help them to navigate a pathway through some pretty intense decision making, as I think all professional advisors have their clients do, then there needs to be the seriousness with the deeper connection and the having some fun. I think that's super important. And fun's definitely one of the traits that I would use to describe my experience in, engaging with your team and seeing them engage with each other.
Well, life's no fun without it.
So, look, I think that's kind of a good point. We've kind of delved into some of the key things that I wanted to touch on today. Exceptional advice to me is all of these things: being yourself, having a life outcome, enjoying the work that you do, enjoying the people that you do it with, but it's not always easy, and it does take work.
And I agree 100%. And may I say, Baz, thank you for your community service in trying to help people, I guess, reach these epiphanies and make these life changes and business changes. That really, I guess, make life better, not just for your clients, but their clients too. And helping people, I guess, have those epiphanies and get that clarity. I think it's a very good service that we're grateful for.
Thanks, mate. Much appreciated. Well, it's not just my mum tuning in and listening. So there is a couple of people out there. Look, I think we're all in this together, and that's one of the things that I wanted to do with having guests on the Exceptional Advice show, is for us as advisors to share our insights. I don't think there's enough conversation about the deeper side of it. Looking into client engagement, looking at how do we go deeper. What are the lessons that we've learnt as we've progressed our careers? And if we can pass that between each other, we'll all get better. But if we can also pass it on, so this kind of wraps up nicely in synchronicity in the whole estate idea. Well, what do I want to leave behind? Well, I want to leave behind some of the awesome wisdom that you've gained. I want to leave behind a lot of the stuff that, I've picked up on the journey that it was nice out the other end of the hardship in learning from my mistakes, but I would have liked to have chanced to maybe learn them without the mistakes. And if we can share some of that stuff together, then advisors themselves can be better. The impact we have our clients can be better. And I think the world can be better. So if we look at the accounting, law, financial advice, if we just take those three particular professions, you guys are the gateway to how people can interact in our society. So we've got the gateway to, the legal infrastructure and the law. We've got the gateway to, our tax system and structuring and business. And we've got the gateway to money and investments and capital. And so it's so important for people to be able to navigate their way through all of those things, but also do it in a way that is about them and their life and having a better impact for them and their families. But the advisors themselves having a better impact because they're more rewarded, because that's actually what they're getting out of the engagement, not just a fee.
Well said.
Thanks, everyone. Kieran, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
And with that, we'll sign off.
Thanks for having us along, Baz. Good chat.
No worries. It's my pleasure. So for everyone, please make sure that you subscribe. So we have this on YouTube and on the podcast networks as well. We're here doing this so we can share these ideas. Obviously, liking, commenting, engaging, and sharing helps actually make this worthwhile and means that we'll be here doing it into the future. So thanks, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next episode. Cheers.